We live in an age that prides itself on intelligence. A world where information travels at the speed of light, where knowledge once locked away in ancient libraries now rests in the palm of our hands. With a single search, we can summon centuries of philosophy, the most advanced science, the deepest art. By every measure, humanity should be entering a golden age of wisdom. And yet, something feels wrong. For all our access to knowledge, our conversations grow shallower. Our attention spans shrink. We no longer seek to understand but to react, to signal, to shout. We drown in information yet starve for truth. Our debates collapse into slogans, our culture is defined by outrage, and our leaders, once expected to embody vision, now mirror the entertainment industry. The very tools meant to liberate our minds seem to have shackled them. This is the paradox of progress. The more data we acquire, the less we seem to know how to think. The internet, once hailed as the ultimate weapon against ignorance, has become the factory of misinformation. Social media, designed to connect us, has become a machine that divides us. The modern world has not killed stupidity. It has industrialized it, scaled it, made it profitable. So the haunting question emerges. Why are we dumbing ourselves down in the very age that promised enlightenment? What force is at work when societies with infinite access to wisdom choose instead the comfort of ignorance? The danger before us is not merely individual foolishness but something larger, a cultural, psychological, and political epidemic of stupidity. And if history has taught us anything, it is that stupidity on such a scale does not end quietly. It ends with collapse. History has always left us warnings, though we rarely listen. Civilizations rise on intelligence, vision, and discipline, but they often fall through arrogance, corruption, and collective blindness. Stupidity is not new. It is woven into the very fabric of human history. Take Rome, once the unmatched center of power. For centuries, discipline and order carried its empire forward. But as decadence spread, spectacle replaced substance. Bread and circuses dulled critical thought. Citizens surrendered their responsibility for governance in exchange for entertainment and distraction. What destroyed Rome was not a lack of knowledge, but a loss of collective wisdom. The empire collapsed not in ignorance of what was happening, but in refusal to confront it. Or consider the witch trials of Europe and Salem. Entire societies convinced themselves that invisible forces were at work, scapegoating innocence in an orgy of fear and superstition. The stupidity was not in individual villagers, many of whom were otherwise intelligent, but in the collective machinery of hysteria that turned communities against themselves. Philosophers have long recognized this danger. Plato warned of mob rule in the Republic, describing democracy's dark tendency to devolve into chaos when the crowd values passion over reason. Nietzsche dissected the herd mentality, where individuals surrender their own judgment to the comforting embrace of conformity. Hannah Arendt, reflecting on the horrors of the 20th century, revealed how evil often arises not from monstrous intellects, but from ordinary people who stop thinking critically, obeying systems without question. These moments teach us something unsettling. Stupidity is not the absence of intelligence but the surrender of it. It thrives when individuals hand over their capacity for thought to the collective, when questioning authority becomes dangerous, and when the convenience of belonging outweighs the courage of doubt. If we map these patterns onto our present, the parallels are undeniable. Just as Rome drowned in distraction, we drown in digital noise. Just as witch hunts fed on paranoia, today's culture feeds on outrage. And just as past masses abandoned their responsibility to think, so too do we, outsourcing judgment to algorithms and influencers. Stupidity, then, is not a relic of history. It is a cycle. And each time it returns, it grows more dangerous, because each time, the tools that spread it become more powerful. Why do intelligent people, capable of reasoning and insight, so often surrender their minds when placed in groups? The answer lies not in a sudden loss of intelligence, but in the quiet, corrosive forces of psychology that shape our behavior when we fear standing alone. Decades of research reveal a disturbing truth. Humans are not built for independent thought as much as they are built for belonging. In the 1950s, Solomon Asch conducted his famous conformity experiments. Volunteers were asked to judge the length of simple lines, an easy task anyone could solve. But when placed in a group where Confederates deliberately gave wrong answers, most participants abandoned their own eyes and repeated the group's error. What the study uncovered was chilling. The truth mattered less than the comfort of agreement. The fear of exclusion, of being the odd one out, proved stronger than reality itself. A decade later, Stanley Milgram revealed an even darker side of obedience. In his experiment, participants were instructed to administer what they believed were painful electric shocks to strangers at the command of an authority figure. Despite visible distress, most continued, choosing obedience over conscience. Here lies the heart of collective stupidity. When the weight of authority or the pressure of the group eclipses individual judgment, morality itself dissolves. Psychologists call this groupthink, a phenomenon where the desire for harmony silences dissent, suppresses critical thought, and produces catastrophically irrational decisions. It explains how governments stumble into disastrous wars, how corporations ignore impending crises, and how communities can demonize outsiders without a shred of evidence. The group becomes a machine that feeds on conformity, and individuals, eager for safety, surrender themselves to it. For what? The answer is survival. To be cast out of the tribe once meant death. Our nervous systems are wired to associate exclusion with existential threat. Thus, stupidity often masquerades as self-preservation. It is easier to chant what the crowd chants, believe what the crowd believes, and obey what the leader commands, than to face the terror of isolation. This is not stupidity as mere lack of knowledge. It is stupidity as a psychological defense, a trade, the death of individuality for the illusion of safety. The crowd offers comfort, belonging, and certainty, but the price it demands is truth, independence, and freedom. Viewed through this lens, collective stupidity becomes a form of psychological horror. It is the silent suffocation of critical thought, the slow erosion of conscience, the transformation of individuals into shadows of themselves. History's darkest moments, from witch hunts to authoritarian regimes, were not carried out by fools, but by ordinary people who chose comfort over courage, conformity over truth. And in today's hyper-connected world, where belonging is measured in likes, shares, and digital approval, the pull of the herd has never been stronger. The question is no longer whether we will conform, but whether we are capable of resisting the seductive tide of collective stupidity before it drowns us entirely. Modern stupidity is not a natural accident. It is engineered, refined, and distributed like a product. What once emerged organically from ignorance has become an industry, an intentional design of distraction and manipulation. To understand this, we must look at how media and technology have rewired not only how we consume information, but how we think itself. Neil Postman, in his prophetic work Amusing Ourselves to Death, warned that society would not collapse under censorship, but under entertainment. He argued that the future would not resemble George Orwell's 1984, where tyranny silences thought, but Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, where pleasure and distraction drown it. The danger, he claimed, was not that we would be deprived of information, but that we would become unable to process it. His warning, issued decades before the rise of the internet, now feels less like a prediction and more like a diagnosis. Marshall McLuhan went further, insisting that the medium is the message. The very format of communication, he argued, shapes the content it delivers. A culture dominated by television, for example, will prioritize images over arguments, emotion over logic, and entertainment over truth. Transpose that to the digital age, and the consequences are stark. Social media platforms thrive not on depth, but on speed. They reward outrage, sensationalism, and emotional triggers because these generate the clicks and engagement that fuel their profit engines. The result is a cultural landscape where thinking is systematically replaced by reacting. Algorithms create echo chambers that reinforce pre-existing beliefs, trapping individuals in a hall of mirrors where every reflection looks like validation. Nuance is erased because it doesn't trend. Complexity is silenced because it doesn't sell. Instead, virality becomes the ultimate currency of truth. If a story spreads fast enough, it no longer matters whether it's accurate. It becomes reality by sheer force of repetition. The effects ripple through every layer of society. Politics is no longer a debate of ideas but a spectacle of personalities. Reality television taught us to cheer for conflict and humiliation, and soon politics became indistinguishable from reality TV itself. Leaders discovered that soundbites and memes carry more power than reasoned arguments. Outrage became strategy. Emotional manipulation became policy. The spectacle, once confined to screens, has consumed the stage of governance itself. Misinformation thrives in this environment because it aligns perfectly with the mechanics of digital distribution. A lie that stirs anger will travel faster than a truth that requires reflection. Studies show that false stories spread significantly faster online than verified ones, not because people are incapable of distinguishing truth, but because the architecture of the platforms prioritizes attention over accuracy. The very structure of our communication has become an incubator for collective stupidity. Influencer culture adds another layer. In a world where expertise has been replaced by charisma, where visibility equals authority, millions look to entertainers, lifestyle bloggers, and online personalities for guidance on politics, philosophy, even morality. The result is a collapse of intellectual hierarchy. The teacher, the scientist, the philosopher, all are drowned out by the louder voice, the brighter thumbnail, the algorithmically blessed influencer who understands nothing but how to keep you watching. This is not just distraction. It is disarmament. A population addicted to entertainment, trapped in digital echo chambers, and guided by influencers rather than thinkers becomes incapable of sustained resistance. It loses the patience for nuance, the appetite for complexity, and the courage for critical thought. It becomes passive, malleable, and predictable. And here lies the ultimate horror. Stupidity has become profitable. Outrage is monetized. Distraction is industrialized. Ignorance is no longer a failure of education but a triumph of design. The machinery of modern media does not simply reflect our stupidity, it manufactures it, amplifies it, and feeds it back to us until it feels like truth. In this sense, the decline of thought is not the unintended consequence of technology, it is its business model. Stupidity is not an accident of human nature, it is an asset in the machinery of modern civilization. A society of distracted, uninformed people is not merely easier to govern, it is easier to exploit. Ignorance has been turned into an economic model, a business strategy, and even a political weapon. Think for a moment about advertising. The most successful campaigns rarely appeal to logic or reason. They bypass critical thought entirely, striking directly at emotion, desire, fear, envy, insecurity. You do not need to understand the science behind a product, only the promise that it will make you more attractive, more successful, more complete. Entire industries depend on this calculated exploitation of irrationality. To keep you buying, you must not question. You must only want. The political world is no different. Campaigns thrive not on depth of policy but on the brevity of slogans, simplistic phrases repeated until they become unquestioned truth. Complex realities are reduced to 3 words, 5 words, a chant that can fit neatly on a placard. The less people analyze, the easier it becomes to mobilize them, not toward critical solutions, but toward obedience. This is not a new strategy. The Roman Empire offered its restless citizens bread and circuses, cheap food and grand spectacles, ensuring that their attention never strayed toward the corruption of their rulers. Today, we do not gather in colosseums, but in the endless scroll of social media feeds, in the manufactured outrage of 24-hour news cycles, in the hypnotic glow of consumer culture. The architecture of our economy rewards distraction. Corporations profit when we remain addicted to fleeting pleasures. Politicians thrive when we are too divided to question the game itself. And the cycle continues. The more we consume without reflection, the more power we surrender. Ignorance, then, is not simply a flaw of the individual. It is cultivated, mass-produced, and sold back to us. It is systemic. It is engineered. Because a society that thinks too much, that questions too deeply, becomes dangerous to the interests of those who benefit from its sleep. And so stupidity, far from being a mere byproduct of modern life, becomes its very fuel. Not all stupidity is loud. Not all ignorance is crude. Some of the most dangerous forms of stupidity are wrapped in the language of sophistication, cloaked in credentials, and praised in lecture halls. This is the realm of what can be called intelligent stupidity, a condition where knowledge becomes a weapon for self-deception rather than self-discovery. It begins when intelligence is mistaken for wisdom. A person may memorize statistics, craft elaborate theories, or speak with eloquence, yet remain blind to their own biases. Pseudo-intellectualism thrives in this blindness. It dresses dogma in academic jargon, turning opinion into doctrine and assumptions into absolute truths. The result is a kind of arrogance, not the humility of true learning, but the certainty of those who believe they cannot be wrong. History has shown that this form of stupidity is often more dangerous than simple ignorance. Nietzsche warned of the last man, the complacent figure who mistakes comfort for progress, who trades vitality for conformity. Jung, too, cautioned against the shadow, the dark, unacknowledged aspects of ourselves that, when denied, manifest destructively in the world. When intelligent people refuse to confront their own shadow, they become prisoners of their own intellect, using logic not to seek truth but to defend illusions. This is how echo chambers are born, not only among the uneducated, but within the ranks of scientists, politicians, and cultural elites. Each camp develops its own sacred language, its own unquestionable axioms, and anyone who dares challenge them is labeled as an outsider, a heretic, or worse. Groupthink, reinforced by sophistication, becomes nearly impossible to penetrate. Consider the technocratic arrogance of our age. Surrounded by data and predictive models, many assume that human life can be reduced to algorithms, that morality can be outsourced to machines, and that complexity can be domesticated into neat systems. Yet history reminds us that the most catastrophic policies, the eugenics movement, authoritarian central planning, totalitarian ideologies, were not driven by uneducated masses, but by highly educated elites who mistook their abstractions for reality. Here, stupidity is not the absence of intelligence, but the refusal to question it. It is the transformation of intellect into ideology, where knowledge ceases to be a tool for exploration and becomes instead a fortress of certainty. This is why moral panics spread through the most educated circles, why dangerous policies are crafted with the language of progress, and why authoritarian regimes justify their power with promises of rational order. The peril of intelligent stupidity is that it convinces both the rulers and the ruled that they are enlightened, even as they march blindly into destruction. It is not loud ignorance that threatens civilization, but sophisticated dogma. For while ignorance can be corrected with learning, arrogance disguised as intelligence cannot be corrected at all. If stupidity is contagious, then resisting it requires more than intelligence. It requires courage. The kind of courage that does not shout, but endures. The kind that refuses to trade truth for comfort, even when the world demands conformity. The first step is solitude. Schopenhauer believed solitude was not a punishment but a privilege. Only in the silence of being alone can a person truly hear their own thoughts, free from the noise of the crowd. To resist collective stupidity, one must embrace the stillness that most people fear. In solitude, the constant pressure to belong fades, and with it, the unconscious compulsion to mimic the herd. Alone, the mind begins to ask questions that group consensus would never allow. But solitude is not enough. Socrates showed us that freedom requires a relentless interrogation of our own beliefs. His wisdom was not in claiming knowledge, but in admitting ignorance. The moment we assume we cannot be wrong, we fall into the very trap of intelligent stupidity. To resist it, we must become students of our own errors, willing to dismantle cherished assumptions, to confront truths that wound our pride. Kierkegaard took this further, teaching that true freedom is inward. It is not given by governments, nor by institutions, nor by movements. It arises when a person dares to stand before the abyss of existence and choose authentically. Inner freedom means refusing to outsource one's conscience to authorities or tribes, even when doing so promises security. It is a radical form of responsibility, the acceptance that no one else can do the thinking or the choosing for you. Breaking free, then, does not mean withdrawing from the world. It means entering it with eyes unclouded by illusions. It means choosing reflection over reaction in a culture addicted to speed. It means seeking silence in an age of noise, protecting inner stillness as if it were the last source of clean air. It means valuing truth more than belonging, even if it isolates you. This path is not easy. The crowd will mock solitude as antisocial. It will call questioning dangerous. It will frame independence as arrogance. But history is clear. Progress has never come from the chorus of voices chanting in unison. It has always begun with a single figure willing to stand apart, to think differently, to risk being called foolish in order to resist true foolishness. In the end, breaking free is not about becoming smarter. It is about becoming braver. It is about refusing the cheap comfort of tribal identity and instead shouldering the heavy responsibility of thought. Collective stupidity thrives on fear, the fear of exclusion, of doubt, of uncertainty. But the individual who embraces these fears, who can sit alone in silence, question even their deepest convictions, and live with the burden of freedom, such a person cannot be made stupid, because they have chosen truth, even when truth is the loneliest path of all. Every civilization that has fallen has carried with it a unique story, yet their endings echo the same refrain. Decay begins not with enemies at the gates, but with blindness within. Stupidity, collective, comfortable, celebrated, erodes the pillars of culture until nothing remains but ruins. Rome was not toppled in a single day. It rotted slowly through decadence, distraction, and the dulling of thought. The warning is not ancient history, it is a mirror. Today we see the same signs. A society drowning in information yet starved of wisdom. Endless distraction masquerading as progress. Outrage replacing dialogue. Polarization poisoning communities. We cannot agree on reality itself, for every truth has been fractured into 1,000 convenient illusions. Technology feeds us what we crave, not what we need, until we become addicts of noise, unable to separate fact from fantasy. These are not small inconveniences, they are symptoms of a deeper disease. If left unchecked, stupidity does not merely amuse, it enslaves. Authoritarianism thrives not on brutality alone, but on the willingness of people to surrender thought in exchange for comfort. It arrives disguised as entertainment, as slogans, as promises of safety. And when it takes hold, the result is always the same: the slow suffocation of freedom, the corrosion of culture, the collapse of meaning itself. But here is the haunting truth: the fate of society does not rest in intelligence. It rests in courage. The courage to stand apart when the crowd demands conformity. The courage to remain silent when the world insists on noise. The courage to think, even when thinking comes with a cost. The greatest danger we face is not ignorance. It is willful stupidity, chosen willingly because it feels easier than truth. And the greatest hope we possess is the refusal to accept it. Each individual who dares to resist becomes a spark against the darkness, a reminder that stupidity only rules when we allow it to. So the question remains, and it lingers like a shadow: will we remain prisoners of manufactured stupidity, lulled by comfort into a slow decay? Or will we reclaim the ancient courage to think, to question, to see clearly even when the world demands blindness? The answer will not be written by philosophers or politicians. It will be written in the daily choices of ordinary people. The choice to resist distraction, to confront illusions, to live not as a servant of the herd but as a guardian of truth. The final warning is simple, but devastating in its weight. Civilizations survive not by intelligence, but by vigilance. And in this age of noise and deception, vigilance means daring to think. The end is not yet written. But if we remain asleep, it will be written for us.